Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidil Anbiya wal Mursaleen. Nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. Last week we had spoken about lying and how lying was impermissible. Inshallah, this week we're going to talk about cases where it actually is permissible to lie. And I know many of you had asked questions about this on where it is that we can lie, in the situations that we can lie in. And from them, so is lying haram in a vacuum? And this is a question that Imam Ghazāli, he starts out with. So if I'm sitting in a room alone and I'm lying, is it haram?
First thing in the vacuum is makruh. Would that be qiyas?
Is it qiyas from Christian? Allahu Akbar. Like immediate application, huh? So he's saying no. Ghazāli, he actually says no. It is impermissible because of the harm that it actually causes. So if you're lying in a vacuum, like so if you're lying and there's no one there to hear it, like kind of thing, in that situation, it is not, that itself is not a problem. The problem is that the harm that it causes others, for the one who receives it. And there are different types of people. There are different types of people who fall under this category of lying. There are people who actually believe the lie. Right. So there are people who receive the lie or they hear a lie and they actually believe it and they relay it forward or they take it forward. Again, a very common application of this is like the WhatsApp forwards that many of us get. And we don't do any type of research into it. And it's sad how little research is required to actually verify how, if this is true or not. Many times what I've done is I can just take like one sentence. So if it's a long forward, if you just take one sentence of the forward and you do a Google search on it, you'll find that there is no basis for a lot of the stuff that is shared. But people believe it. And the reason they believe it is because somebody who they trust forwarded it to them. And this now forwarding can actually cause harm or harm others. And this is what we classically know as ignorance. Ghazāli argues that sometimes ignorance actually is bliss. He said because there are certain people who they just don't have the capacity to take that knowledge or take that information and use it in a meaningful way. And if they actually had that, if you gave them that information, it would be more harmful for them than it would be beneficial. Thank you. So here, the example that Imam Ghazāli mentions, he says, sometimes lying is better than the truth. What about a man who is chasing after another with a sword? The one being chased enters a house, and the one with the sword comes across you saying, have you seen so-and-so? Would you not say, I haven't seen him? And here he says, and I didn't put the rest of the narration, but he said, this isn't lying. This is actually not considered lying. Why? Why would this be okay? Or is this not okay?
Because you're saving someone's life.
Because you're saving someone's life. Right? You're saving someone's life. Okay, what if that person was a killer? The person who you're saving is a killer.
There should be justice.
Accent, huh? Okay, you're starting to learn with the terminologies. So over here, whatever the case might be, is it in my hand to serve justice? Number one, or this person here who's running after. If you see somebody running after another person with a gun, what is the likelihood of this person being someone who's going to enforce some type of justice or enforce some kind of due process? Right, like vigilantism. Yeah, like I'm saying, vigilantism. Even a cop, is a cop allowed to go and just shoot people? No, he's not. Right. So vigilantism is something that is forbidden in the Sharia, and it's also forbidden legally. He actually says lying would be an obligation. Again, because ismat dam al-Muslim, or like the sanctity of Muslim blood, is something that has to be, and it is an obligation to preserve. He also says that speech is a means to an end. So when we use words, when we communicate with others, this is actually a means to an end. There's a goal that we are trying to reach with that information. There's a goal that we're trying to reach when we share something or when we say something to someone. So when is lying haram? When is lying haram? And he sets up here a few algorithms that help decide this, but it still becomes somewhat subjective. So he says, if my end goal is good, and to tell the truth or to tell the lie is the same, right? It's the same outcome, whether I tell the truth or whether I lie. In this situation, it would be what? It would be haram, right? Because lying, like we said, lying is haram. Lying is impermissible. And when it's equal to do them, I have to choose to tell the truth. All right. If I want something good, and the only way to achieve that means is to lie, it is what? What is the ruling? It's mubah. It's mubah. If the thing I'm lying for is mubah, then the ruling is also mubah. If the thing I'm lying to, like if I'm doing it to preserve something that is an obligation, in this situation, lying is an obligation. Yes. Oh, mubah is neutral. Like there's no sin. There's no sin and there's no reward for doing such. Yes.
I have a question though, like obviously like for like personal gain, like if you like lie on like a job.
We'll get to that, and then we'll talk about those situations. Like I know a lot of us, like especially people who are starting out, they're like, okay, if I don't show any experience, it's like I won't get into the field, and everybody in the field is doing it, right? This is very common, especially like people who are working in any type of software. Software engineers, or they're doing any type of coding. They're like, well, we have to show that we're part of like 10 companies and we have this experience. Otherwise, they're not going to hire us. So what do I do in that situation? And we'll talk about that, inshallah. Yes. Yeah.
So you're lying for something that's good.
Yeah.
And the only way you can get that good is to lie.
Yeah.
That's mubah.
What is the goal? The goal itself has to be mubah, and the only way to get to that goal. Because there are certain things like, for example, getting let me think of a good example. Because the example for wajib is clear, right? If I'm trying to preserve somebody's life, or I'm trying to preserve somebody's wealth, or I'm trying to preserve my wealth. If there's somebody who is, and we'll talk about those, yeah. Yeah, yes, that's a good example, because I'm not obligated to preserve that friendship, right? That it's something that is permissible for me to maintain. And if I go out of my way to lie in that, it is mubah in that situation. It is not an obligation for me to lie, and it's not haram either. So that's actually a good example.
Doesn't matter if it's for yourself
Or for someone else. It's okay. So I mean, at the end of the day, all of this is going to revolve around, like this one here is going to revolve around relationships, and this one here is going to revolve around some type of preservation. It's going to be a preservation of either life, or it's going to be a preservation of wealth, right? One of the two. And this one is going to revolve around relationships, right? There are two friends that are fighting, and you go to him. He's like, "Yeah, man, he was just talking about you, and he was saying like he really wants to meet you, and like he's sorry about what happened." You go to him like, "Yeah, man, he was like really sorry about what happened. I lied to both of them, right? I lied to both of them. But why did I lie? Because I want something good, and I want them to come together." So we'll get to that. So and we had said, and this is the example, right? The blood of the Muslim is sacred. Therefore, in order to preserve that blood, if I have to lie, I am obligated now to lie. So even in these scenarios, one should do his utmost to avoid it. Why? If I keep finding myself in these situations where I'm doing these algorithms and trying to figure out if it's okay for me to lie or not, what should I do? Right, I try to avoid those situations and really start to reassess myself and my decisions and what it is that I'm doing. Like, why do I keep ending up in these situations where I have to lie? And the other problem is it can become a habit. And all of a sudden, those lines that I start drawing, they become blurrier and blurrier. So staying away from those things that so basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us a pasture to graze on. And he says the thing that we're allowed to graze on is the halal, and the fence is the haram. He said, and the closer you get to the fence, the closer you will get to haram. So Kulthum, she narrates that I did not, and this is not the daughter of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She said that I did not hear the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam allow lying except in 3 situations: in battle, for bringing reconciliation among others, and when a husband speaks to his wife, or when a wife speaks to her husband. This hadith is narrated in Muslim. This first part is really famous, right? Right. The first part is really famous. The second one, not so much. What is happening in each of these scenarios? So in the first one, what's happening? Why is it okay to lie? Because it's war, right? You're at war, and it's okay to lie. You should lie. This one, bringing reconciliation, we had spoken about it, that this is something that is good, bringing people together, establishing relationships, something that is healthy, something that should be encouraged. Like when a husband speaks to his wife or when a wife speaks to her husband. Like if a wife calls her husband, like, where are you? I'm with the sheikh. and you're really not with him. Yeah, with sheikh, all right. I'm sorry. So what kind of lies are intended here?
Preserve family.
Right. Those that bring reconciliation. Right. Those are the type of lies that are intended. Like what? What is an example of this? Of lying to my wife. Yeah. Yeah.
The example the Sheikh gave was, let's say, like, tell me you love me, or you love me.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar.
He said, lie until you actually fall in love.
Allah. Wow.
Oh, it's a simple routine one. If she cooks and it's not really tasty,
Yeah.
and you say, oh, this is so good. Price up.
No, absolutely.
You look good.
So the thing is, when it comes to a lot of superficial things that don't have any major ramifications to them, right? So for example, if she's wearing an outfit that you don't really care for and she asks you, how do you look? What do you say? Amazing. You look beautiful. Or if there's food, she didn't cook it like well, or you didn't like it, you say it's tasty. And the same thing applies to the husband. Maybe he builds a desk and he breaks it, right? You're like, oh no, you did a good job. Like, it's like so these type of things where it involves reconciliation of the relationship, that's where this applies, right? It doesn't apply to just like blatant lying or using it as excuse, like, where were you all night? It's like, I was praying. No, what I mean? Like, it's those situations it doesn't apply to, because it doesn't bring any reconciliation. It only increases doubt in the relationship. So there's some hadith that he shared. So over here, we said that these were the three that Kulthum had mentioned. And over here, a liar is not one who tries to bring reconciliation among people and speaks good, or he conveys good. So the Prophet ﷺ is saying it is permissible to lie in these situations, it's permissible to lie in these scenarios. There's one narration here that happened to Ibn Abi Azra, and this might be related to what you were talking about. He said during the Khilafah of Umar, it was claimed that he would abandon all the women that he married. So he would just marry and then he would just kind of leave them. He wouldn't really take care of them. And he became known among the people for that. So he was upset when he heard like other people saying this about him. So he went to Ibn Abi Arqam and Abdullah ibn Arqam, and he brought him to his house. And he was like, he asked his wife, he said, swear by Allah, do you hate me? And she's like, I'm not going to swear by Allah. And he was like, swear by Allah that you hate me. And she's like, okay, I hate you. And then he turned to Abdullah and he was like, see, this is what I have to deal with. This is what I put up with. Then they went back to Umar. Both of them, they went to Umar, and he told Umar what happened. And then he called for his wife. So his wife came back, and she came with her aunt. And the Umar said, he's like, why did you say this? What happened? She was like, well, you want me to lie? And you know what he said? He said, yeah. He said, I want you to lie. And this is the part that really struck me. He said, if one of you doesn't love us, don't tell us that. Very few homes are built on love alone. We live together in tranquility based on our Islam and ihsan, or being benevolent and kind to one another. Why? Because love is, don't get me wrong, love is an important element. That's definitely there, but it is not enough to build and sustain a marriage. It's just not. Right? It's an important thing, don't get me wrong, but it's not enough to build and sustain a marriage. And you will find that if you show Islam and you show ihsan and you're benevolent, you know what will happen? Love. It's very natural, right? When somebody cares for you, when somebody looks out for you, when somebody is being nice to you, it's very natural to have an inclination toward that person. And even love is levels, right? What kind of love were we talking about before, Fazia? Right. So that's beyond love at that point, right? So that's more infatuation, right? Like ishq. But love, there are levels to love. Like, is it necessary that every husband and wife love each other at level 10? No, it's not, right? It's important that there's love. It's important that there's respect. It's important that they share similar goals. Looking at a lot of couples who are looking to get married, it's like, oh well, we like the same movies, we like going to the same places. Well, and when you change your, when you change your mind next year about what you like and what you enjoy doing and the foods you like, what's going to happen? Right? Hobbies, likes, dislikes, these are constantly fluctuating through our lives. Those things, they never stay the same. We are not going to be the same person that we are today that we are next year. That's just not going to happen. And if I am, then there's another problem altogether. Like there's a huge stagnation in my growth. I, as a Muslim, should always look to grow spiritually. I should always look to grow financially, socially, physically, like in all different ways, like not gain weight physically, but like, you know what I mean? I should always look to better myself. I should always be trying to improve myself. And if I understand that I'm trying to improve myself, that means my likes and my dislikes and my hobbies, these things are constantly going to be in flux. So it's not enough to share likes. You have to share goals. And the second problem, the second issue that I see is that because of social media, because of all these apps, because, before I used to think there was a lack of choice. Now I think there's just too much choice, right? It's just overwhelming, right? It's like, and what happens is when you're overwhelmed, you get frozen with choice. Like you don't know what to do and what to choose. And I'll just give you one very simple piece of advice. Look for something good. That's it. That's all you have to look for. Stop looking for something better, because there will always be something better, including someone better for the person who I'm looking for. Like I am not the peak, like in any way, shape, or form. There's always going to be someone better than me. And if I understand that there's someone better for me, there's always going to be someone better for her. But we are looking to establish something good. It's very difficult to establish something better because it's always going to be in my mind. Allah make it easy for you guys. So these three situations have clearly been defined, and anything that falls into those categories, so anything that involves any type of islah, anything that involves any type of reconciliation, then these are things that are very encouraged. These are things that are supposed to be done. So do other situations apply? What do you guys think? Yeah, absolutely, right? There are other situations. So here, in the presence of someone oppressive or the ruler, and because these are personal issues, to the extent, if you steal and the police officer stops you, or even in an Islamic government, and he said, do you steal? Ghazāli would tell you, you are obligated to say what? You're obligated to say no. If I am caught stealing, if I am caught committing adultery, if I am caught lying, I am obligated to what? I'm obligated to deny it. Why?
Not normalize this crime.
Okay, so he that's the argument that he uses. He's like, you don't want to spread fahisha, right? You don't want to normalize it. You don't want to make people think that this is okay. And secondly, what?
Proof of burden is on someone.
Well, the proof of burden, like, from a legal aspect, for sure, the proof of burden is on them. But not just that, you don't want to expose yourself and cause some type of penalty and harm to come to you. Because remember, what did we say? The idea is self-preservation, right? Preserving ourselves or preserving others. So the next time the police officer tells you, were you speeding, sir? You're like, absolutely not. You don't know what you're talking about. Right? Yeah. No, and so what we'll do, yeah.
Someone feels guilty,
So there sense, right? So there's a difference between being caught and admittance. You guys know the difference? You guys understand the difference? Yeah. So over here is being caught. You can lie. According to Ghazāli, you should lie. Yeah. It's okay. You don't have to. This is his. This is his. Akhi, Habibi, wajib. He's saying it's an obligation. I mean, I can see his point and I can understand it, but at the end of the day, man, everybody's lamir is different. Everybody's heart is different.
What about when there's the same punishment, where you have to say like, I drink to does that count here too?
So even in that situation, what is the punishment? In li'an, you're talking about li'an. So basically what happens is that a husband accuses his wife or a wife accuses her husband. They go in front of the judge and the judge says, okay, do li'an. You curse each other 4 times. And then after that, what happens? They're separated and they can never marry again.
But then if you're lying, then Allah there's no punishment.
I understand.
So you can apply here.
So what do you do? You make Tawbah.
Yeah, okay, you make trouble, but you don't lie.
طيب. What do you want me to do? I'm just sharing. I'm sharing his opinion. He said no. Again, because for him in this situation, he says عصمة الدم المسلم ومال المسلم is أولى. That you preserve your life and your property is the priority versus admitting to this misdeed. Is he saying that you should do those things?
No.
Absolutely not, right? He's not saying you should go and like go steal and then start lying, or I mean, like, or go commit adultery and just deny it, left and right. There's going to become a point where you get caught, right? It's very natural. Like you will get caught. I remember one of my friends, when like he used to deal drugs before he came to Islam, and he you know what he said to me? He's like, I have to get lucky every day. A cop only needs to get lucky once. And that's how it is, committing sins, doing things that are illegal. It's usually not the first time that the person gets caught. It's usually after a series that an individual caught because there's a pattern that's there. May Allah protect us. But again, these are personal issues. And at the end of the day, if I don't admit to stealing, or if I deny it, or if I don't admit to speeding, or I don't admit to that, who is being hurt in the society? Just me, right? It's just me as an individual. And not just that, now that I've been caught, what should happen ideally? Right, I should change, right? I should use that as a catalyst to change. How many, there are even scholars who are highway robbers, and after they got caught, they became scholars. It happens. Like, we never know what the catalyst for Tawbah is going to be for the individual. Huh? SubhanAllah. So what if it involves another? Now, what if I'm taking somebody else's right? He says, if it's private, then it should remain private. So if I know that somebody stole something, do I snitch?
Yeah, it's a crime.
Okay.
Would depend on the context there. And or the
But-
value we want to
Sure. So how do you determine that gravity?
be also food versus it's sold
The podium from the podium from Congress,
car.
or the microphone, right? So, in general, things should remain private. In general, but when it comes to actually physically taking somebody else's right, yeah, absolutely. There's no reason to hide it. There's no reason to hide these things. But yes.
Before we go on, but previously when I died,
Yeah.
just took somebody's estate.
So
So I'm harming the individual as well as harming myself.
sure, but this has to do with you personally. This doesn't have to do with a third party.
But if you allow somebody to just committing the same thing over and over again.
It depends on the individual. There's no guarantee. You need statistics to prove that. To prove that a person who lied to get out of situation becomes a habitual liar. Or you need to prove that a person who stole once and lied about it then fell into a life of crime. Like, it's not arbitrary.
Then why, we have punishment, mind out.
To prevent people. I mean, at the end of the day, akhi, like here, public drinking, public intoxication. Is there punishment in Islam for it?
Yeah.
Private intoxication? No. Okay. Like riba is min akbar al-kabair, right? Yes or no? Dave, if a person gets caught consuming riba, what's the punishment? Nothing.
What about this scheme?
Okay. I get what you're saying, but at the end of the day, there's nothing that guarantees that this person will become a habitual liar. There's nothing that guarantees that he will become a thief. There's nothing that guarantees he'll become righteous. Like, we just don't know. So that's something that is deserving of study. I don't have a problem with that. But at the end of the day, he's saying that, again, preserving your life and your property comes first. For over admitting to something. So there's a difference between admittance and making tawbah. I don't have to admit to something, but I can make tawbah for it. Yeah, if I made ghiba of someone, or if I did steal somebody's money, if I never admitted to them, can I seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or no?
Of course, we're talking
Hmm.
So you have to like look more into
That's fine. But like this is like I said, this is Ghazali's argument, and this is his method, and this is what he used. This is why he presented what he did. So you can the lie here is through denial. If someone's like, did you see so and so do this, or did you see so and so do that, or say this, or say that? This is what he's talking about. That lying in those situations, in general, should remain private, because the problem is when you bring in a third party without permission, this ends up creating more problems. It ends up creating more confusion. Let me think of an example.
Someone
Mhm.
and that third party already forgave
Hmm.
and didn't want to.
Yeah, they don't want to announce it to the public.
And
So,
someone started bringing it up.
Sure.
That
Yeah.
third party, that victim.
yeah. Or do you know so and so, or was he at this place? And you're like, no, he wasn't. And again, there's levels to all of this. There's levels to all of this, and sometimes it's not always going to be 100% clear. And obviously, everything has a limit. So he defines the limit by balancing the results in the statement. So when can you lie depends on the results. And who is the one that balances this? The individual. And it becomes very subjective on when you decide this and how to apply it. So what if they're equal? What if the outcome and if I lie or tell the truth is the same?
Oh,
I tell the truth, right? There's always going to be a preference to tell the truth, right? The preference is always going to lean in that direction. And like we said, if it involves the right of the other, there's no concession in this situation. When it comes to stealing, when it comes to killing, even in modern society, when we talk about when am I obligated now to share a secret? Even against the law, it toes the line. But there are two very specific situations where it will apply. Yes. Okay, so physical harm. Either harming himself or another. Like I'm gonna go and kill so and so. I'm gonna go hurt so and so. At that point, I am now obligated to share that information. What else?
That's a crime.
Okay,
Public crime is
right. So a public crime.
like someone came with a question on someone,
Mhm.
got like a trust.
Yeah.
I mean, asking about someone to make a contact with.
Yeah. So these situations, it's okay to make ghiba, right? So ghiba is very different from lying,
Oh, really?
right? So when it comes to business transactions, when it comes to marriage,
That's why.
right? Right. So that's all that it's not considered backbiting in those situations. So one of them, like we said, physical harm. The second one, any type of public endangerment. Third one, any type of sexual molestation, right? This is something that cannot be hidden. And unfortunately, this is a big problem in our community. And when I say our community, I don't mean Darija specifically, but I mean like the Muslim community, in general. That there are many things that are swept under the rug, that have to be brought out and have to be shared. And it's unfortunate that there's so much community pressure to hide a lot of these things. May Allah guide us. So why lie? Like we said, most lying. Why do people lie? It's usually for seeking some type of self-preservation or seeking some type of self-interest. In general, it's two, right? Because I'm trying to increase my status, make myself look bigger than I am, or trying to increase my wealth. And if you lose these things, right? If I lose my status or if I lose my health, I'm not really causing any harm per se. So there's no reason for me to actually lie. So Asma, she reported that a woman came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, I have a co-wife. Is there any harm for me if I give her the false impression of me getting a gift from him? There, Allah's Messenger said, the one who creates such a false impression is not of receiving what one has not been given, is like the one who wears a garment of falsehood. This creates enmity. It creates jealousy, right? And these things are extremely problematic. And all she's trying to do is gain some status over, like she's trying to show up her co-wife. And this is extremely problematic. So examples that he uses, a scholar who gives fatwa without verifying, he said this is just like lying. If you're not using the knowledge, if you're not using the information and you give fatwa, this is just like lying. He says narrating a hadith that he knows isn't established. He knows, right? He knows the hadith isn't established. And again, this is usually to gain status. What had happened is early during the muhaddithin, you had this gharib culture. And the gharib culture was getting the strangest and the most unique hadith because the hadith had become well known. There were a set of well-known hadith, and there were some that weren't as well known. And everybody kind of struggled to get those hadith. And when those hadiths were got, sometimes you went into fabricated ones, sometimes people would fabricate them in order to gain status. And both these situations are haram. They're clearly haram because you have an option of saying, I don't know. It's not necessary to give an answer to every single fatwa. So weak is different versus fabricated. So we're here specifically, we're talking about fabricated hadith. So there are individuals who are under your care. So for example, your wife or your children, is it okay to lie to them about like small things, right? So if my son doesn't want to go to school, he'd be like, hey, I'll give you some candy when you come back. And I have no intention of giving any candy. Is that okay? So he actually says it's permissible. It's mubah to do that, to encourage them to do certain things. And why? Remember the goal. Remember that you guys remember the scale that Ghazāli set up? The scale that he set up, and he's like, it's not really harming anyone by doing this. So, again, because the children are under your direct care, it's not. Yeah.
Isn't there hadith where
I mean,
said like he's gonna give something for a child and he doesn't,
yeah. The hadith is weak. So yeah,
I see the letters, but there's no intentional harm, there's no
exactly.
serious emotional health problem.
Is it a good habit?
No.
No, obviously not. So all of these things that we're talking about, just because something is permissible, it means that it is a tool that you can use time and again. Is it a good idea to abuse any tool? No. Right. And these would still be considered a type of lie, just the ramifications concerning it aren't as strong. So it's important to keep in mind to have that goal, because we had talked about what the end goal is and versus the statement and how to create that balance. And this is one of those situations, again, to encourage them to do things that they normally wouldn't do. So whoever lies with this intention has entered the realm of ijtihad. And this is something that he mentions, he said, if your goal is to reconcile, is it sound enough to withhold accountability? Because we have our own biases when we make these decisions. And I'm actually accountable for that bias. I'm not accountable for the ijtihad. If I actually do ijtihad, I'm not accountable for that. But if I know my shahwa, if I know my bias is playing a role in my decision, then I have a choice. Even in this situation, I have a choice to what? To abstain from making that decision and abstain from lying. So he's saying that it's a very fine line and we should be careful when we do it and when we utilize it. So yes, that internal reasoning can become extremely convoluted, right? We can always kind of skew the reasons of why we do things and why we come up with things. And if I'm at that point where I'm not really sure, I'm now obligated to leave off lying. If I feel the reason that I'm lying is biased because I want some type of goal or I want some type of result, at that point, I'm obligated to leave it and I have to tell the truth. So again, except where it involves cases of protecting others, and we had talked about protection, physical protection and protection of their wealth. There's a number of misapplications concerning this. So a lot of people, they say they have good goals. Like, why did people fabricate a hadith? They said, well, we wanted to encourage people to do good and we wanted them to abstain from doing evil things and bad things with a righteous intention. The problem is this goes against the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that is very well known, that whoever lies on me intentionally, then let him take his seat in the fire, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from that. Lying is a concession for a need, right? If there is a need for it, this is the only time that this tool is allowed to be utilized. And fabricating, there's no need. Why? Because we already have clear texts. We have clear verses, we have clear hadith. There's no reason to add to the sharia. There's no reason to add to any of these things. In the next chapter, inshallah, warning from lying and indirect speech, we'll talk about this next week. But we'll end here. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqi nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. You have any questions? Oh, now I guess we can ask specific scenarios, right? Oh, I wasn't looking forward to this one. I'm sorry. Yes. So it's not just it's like double speech. So sometimes speaking with double meanings. Yeah. Yes.
When we talk about lying and the time it is okay to do so, I think sometimes when we say subjectivity, culture, all of that comes into play, doesn't it? And
Sure.
in some cultures it's okay to lie, but it might not be okay.
So culture is an overarching thing, right? And if it falls outside of the Sharia, it doesn't matter what the culture is. For example, if it's a particular culture for a man to wear short shorts, it doesn't matter what the culture is. Shar'an, I'm obligated to wear shorts that are longer. Like regardless of it doesn't matter what the culture is. So there are scenarios where it doesn't matter what the culture is, it wouldn't apply. But over here, it really depends on the specific application. So what about lying on my taxes? Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No. These things need to be reported. These things need to be reported. So, yeah, like I know that there is a culture of like snitching and this idea of loyalty, but it's not about being loyal to individuals. It's about being loyal to Allah and His Messenger and preserving society. Right? That's where our loyalties actually should be and where they should lie. So what do you guys think about lying on your taxes?
Well, generally, I would say no, because we have spreading corruption, but if taxes are unreasonable and go against.
So how do you define unreasonable? Yeah, I understand. So there's a bit of subjectivity. So
it would turn
yeah.
into
Yeah.
tyranny.
Yeah.
So then where's the line?
Yeah, where's the line? I mean, stay within your legal boundaries. I have no issue in people utilizing legal loopholes, right? There's a lot of loopholes that you can utilize. If any of you have a small business and you sit on your laptop at home, you've just created a home office space, right? So the reason I'm showing that is that you can exaggerate some of these things to actually represent, and the idea is to what? To save money, right? So that you don't give it to the government. And whatever loopholes are available, I encourage everyone to take full advantage of them. There's no reason to give your money to the government if you do not have to. What about on the resume thing? What do you guys think about that? Don't ask. just let the recruiter take care of it, right? It's like you do my resume for you, and the sin is upon you. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Just to be clear though, like using the tax code in the tax code, that's not a lie.
No, that's not a lie. No. You're just. So the thing is, but sometimes it's exaggeration, right? There's an element of exaggeration that's there. Is this car being used for business purposes? And you took one business trip. You'd be like, yeah, absolutely, right? Or if I sat on my laptop one day, or for like an hour, it's like I just created a home office. So I mean, there's an element. I agree with you. It's not blatant lying, but there is an element of exaggeration that definitely applies. Yeah.
For the resume, I feel like would it not be finished before because if you're the same job,
Yeah. So I mean, it's extremely problematic. What I usually yeah. So I think even in this, like I've had like a few programmers come to me like, we really don't know what to do. Everybody else is claiming 20 years of experience and they're like 18 years old, and it's like, so, how do we kind of balance this and how do we figure out? I said, do you have friends who have their own companies and have their own industries and they do their own thing or they have their own private businesses? He was like, yeah. I was like, do one chore for all of them. Do just one chore for all of them. And then you can claim you worked for them for however long. You don't even need to take pay. It's not like they're going to go and like try to verify like pay stubs and figure out like, where you work and things like that. Because it's unfortunate the culture has moved in that direction. And over here, again, there's it's not, again, it's not blatant lying, but there is a sense of exaggeration that's definitely there. But I really, like, you have to, I don't know why it's the culture here, but having a gap in your resume is death. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's very difficult to get a job if you have that. You know, you got, for all you guys, I would just suggest opening up an LLC, even if you don't have one, just to show that you had some kind of employment going on during any gaps that you might have had in your employment.
That same rule would apply for references.
For references, yeah. I mean, but even for references, there are different types of references, right? They're professional and they're personal. And like, I had a friend reach out to me. He's like, hey, can I use it as a reference? I was like, yeah, as a personal reference. I was like, you've never done anything for me. I don't, you know what I mean? I can't use you as a professional reference. Like, cause I don't know you professionally. Like, I just know you as a friend. He didn't really like that, but I was like, do a job for me. You know what I mean? Like, then I could do that. Yeah. 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 So no, I agree. Like, so the thing is there room here? I think there is, but I am not his only resource. Does that make sense? So for example, if there's somebody who's like maybe fresh out of college, they've had 0 internships, they like really misuse their opportunities, and they're like a super introvert, they don't even have any friends, you're the only person they know. Yeah, sure. You know what I mean? But how many people are like that? I think most people are more networked than they realize. And not just that, you have all these people who are willing to kind of, you know, like, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Be like, hey, listen, I will create a company that you worked for, and he'll be like, okay, I'll create a company that you work for. And you can do that. Like, you know, what does it take to create a company? Like, not that's for an LLC. Like, that's an official company. But like, just me claiming to have one in my home, it takes nothing. It takes nothing, right? A bank account or something. Not even that. Just a phone number or an email, right? You know, jmindustries@gmail.com. Like, us. Like, I have it's you know, Allah make it easy. Allah make it easy. Yes.
It's a little bit related to this topic. What about taking the corporate law, like business laws?
Oh, business loans? That's a little longer conversation, because that conversation involves more so like, what is riba? How do you define it? And in what situations does it apply? And or on top of that, if you consider it riba, is it darura? So
go under the maqasid al-sharia.
Like I said, if it is a darura, but how do you define it in this situation? How do you define it as a need? But like I said, the conversation to have even before that is, does riba apply to fiat currency or not?
Yeah.
So anyway, sorry. Okay, Allah make it easy. Allah protect us from riba. Yalla, sallallahu ala khayri khalqi nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sallam. Inshallah, I'll see all of you next week. Oh, we have another one?
Yeah.
Tfadal.
You know, like, just in general, there are these encouraging, you know, telling them who's not lying.
Sure.
A believer, maybe like a coward in my
He can't be a liar. Ahsan. Yeah.
I mean, where does that fit into this whole discussion today? About a believer can't be a liar.
It's concession. It's a concession for specific cases. This is not like blatant lying. I'm sorry? No, it's a rukhsa, ya akhi. And even concessions, like when we use the example in the usul class about eating the dead deer meat, how often am I going to do that? Right? It's something that I'm supposed to utilize as a last means. I don't have any other way out. There's nothing else I can do. And again, even we had spoken about in this class, when it starts becoming a habit, there's a bigger problem. There's a bigger issue.
I feel like with the running in the house and thinking like, where does this man go? And like, with danger, it makes more sense. But for self accountability, like, I guess.
Yeah. No, it's tough. It's tough for sure. Okay. Yalla. Zabiha?
Exceptions for.
Allahu Akbar. Texas Jacks.